Okay, thank you very much. We're going to get started with Jim Furey. His presentation, Jim Furey is the General Manager of PendoTech. His presentation, Qualification and Control System Integration of Single-Use Inline Sensors. Jim.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks for the invite to do this. So that's the title of my talk, like Brian just mentioned, Qualification and Control System Integration. And that's from the legal department. And this is a presentation overview, a little on our company background, then on the main sensors used in bioprocessing for inline monitoring, and what does a single sensor actually mean generically, a qualification of user requirements with an example, testing of the monitors alone, independent of sensors, integration to control systems, and then a conclusion. Just a little background on our company. We focus on the automation and data acquisition in bioprocess around single-use sensing technology and also process development systems. Been in business since 2005 and located in Princeton, New Jersey. And our company members have decades of experience in their respective fields. We have product development, mechanical engineering, computer programming, sales, and marketing. And our products include sensors, monitors, and transmitters. We also have standard control systems towards process development with advanced data collection features. And we also do customized solutions. So we don't do custom systems, we just do custom solutions where we can kind of bundle things together for our customers. We're not going to talk about this in the presentation. We're going to focus on sensors and monitors, but these are the 5 standard systems that we have, again, targeted towards process development. The sensors that we offer that are most of the primary inline measurements in bioprocess for monitoring control are pressure, temperature, conductivity, absorbance for either UV or other, or turbidity and flow. One of the most frequent questions we get are, what about pH? There's a number of companies been working on that, and we don't have any core technology development programs in that area, but it's been very difficult to come up with a rapid response inline with a wide range sensor for pH in a single-use fashion. So what does a single-use sensor mean? This isn't the most generic definition, and this is more related to the core design requirements. One would be low cost. If you're going to use it once, you want to be able to throw it away and minimize that cost. So one of the ways to do that is recycle as much of the electronics as possible by minimizing the product contact component. And the other main one is the manner of use. The sensor should not require calibration because any time that you would have to introduce any foreign matter to a fluid stream, that's detrimental to the whole process of not wanting to have to clean, etc. So there's different approaches available to meet that requirement, and that's one of the things we'll touch on. If you were a user and looking at a single-use sensor, you would really need to put together your own user requirements, and then you could compare that to products on the market to see if they meet those requirements. So this is kind of a list that we put together. We'll go into these in a little detail. Product, contact materials, performance, sensor manufacturing environment, process compatibility, compatibility with sterilization, bioburden reduction treatments, control system integration, and any regulatory approvals required. So the first one would be fluid contact materials. One of the basic items that people want in terms of considering to use any component in a bioprocess is it safe? Because eventually anything that would come in contact with it would make its way into the drug substance. So biocompatibility and toxicology, most people refer to USP Class 6. In the medical device world, it's more ISO 10993-1. And the second item is prefer not to have any risk of BSE, TSE, and that really comes down to meeting the EMA 410 Rev 2 guidelines. And then also, if you're going to look at a material that may be exposed to gamma, you'd want to make sure it's compatible with gamma irradiation, which can be very damaging to certain materials. The other one is performance. If you were to look at your process and see what performance would be required to meet the process requirements with respect to percent accuracy, range, and other parameters that may be important. And also in terms of performance, again, is typically that calibration not required. The sensor manufacturing environment, if you're going to put a sensor into your system, you don't want it to introduce any particulates or anything that may cause contamination. So you want to make sure the sensors are assembled in a clean manufacturing environment. And the other thing is to make sure there's a quality system in place that has traceability and SOPs that are exist and are followed. And an important one is process compatibility. So you got to make sure the materials are compatible with what they may see in a process. Usually preliminary screening for this is more just a chemical compatibility check. Later, if you're going to go towards implementation, you really need to do leachables and extractables. And you have to make sure that physically the sensor will withstand the process parameters. So not that it may have to measure at all these parameters, but you want to make sure it's not going to fail or crack or anything like that in case there's accidental exposure. And you also want to have a clean integration so it doesn't interfere with any of your process operations. And then next is compatibility with any sterilization, bioburden reduction techniques. As everyone knows, autoclaving, thermal can be very destructive on certain materials. And then same as gamma, and then chemical such as ETO, if that was a chosen method of treatment, you'd have to make sure that doesn't degrade the materials. Control system integration may or may not be important because you could choose to just have a local display. But if you are going to integrate the sensor to a higher level system, this would be important to have some sort of monitor that can communicate with higher level systems. If it's important, you'd also want to make sure any regulatory approvals are met, such as CE, if you would be in Europe. So using one of our products as an example, when we developed this product, it's obviously not going to meet everyone's requirements, but it was targeted within a certain range of performance parameters such that it would meet a number of the requirements and a number of the applications. So the first is the materials are class 6. It meets the EMA 410 Rev 3 guidelines. Each sensor is 100% tested in quality for accuracy in manufacturing. For accuracy, leaks, electrical continuity, and there's no calibration required. And I'll touch on that performance later. The sensors are manufactured in a clean room and FDA registered ISO 13485 facility. As far as process compatibility, we tested these for compatibility with sodium hydroxide, which they may be exposed to in certain sanitization processes. And they're available in 2 materials. And the commonly used materials were selected so people do have experience with those materials already and are comfortable, but we have a controlled extraction underway, which is kind of the phase 1 of a leachables extractable study. And you'll see from the picture there, we have a wide range of connections available: sanitary flange, distant hose barb, lure, and so that enables its integration to different types of fluid paths. And we also have done testing up to as high as we could go, which is 150, and with no change in performance or detrimental effects. Any exposure beyond that would pretty much cause other components to fail, such as tubing and whatnot, so we felt 150 was a good range. We've demonstrated with this product no change after exposure to gamma, And we have application notes on autoclaving, which describe conditions which don't impact their performance. So we touched on that calibration not required. So how we obtain that with our product is we make our MEMS chips, which are microfabricated pressure sensing chips, to very tight tolerances, and they're tested to any monitor to perform within those set tolerances. So essentially, they're all the same. So that's one of the key aspects of why calibration is not required. And we manufacture our own special sensing chips that go above and beyond the range of those typically used in the medical area. So again, they're 100% tested, and then we also, say someone has a process where they want to have a complete traceability on a sensor that was used for a certain process. Very common is, say, in a viral clearance step in a biotech process, the FDA may ask for the calibration data on the gauge that was used in that critical process. So we do offer NIST traceable with individual sensors if a customer requests that, which most don't need that, but that's something important to consider. Do you need a NIST sensor or NIST certificate for your sensor that was used in a specific process? Because inevitably that adds cost if you don't need it. As far as control system integration, by the nature of pretty much any sensor, it's kind of an indirect measurement. You're measuring some parameter that's correlated to the actual measurement. So, for instance, the pressure sensor, you need an excitation voltage, and then you need something to read it, and then something to transmit it. We have a monitor called the PressureMAT that does this, but we have numerous customers that design their own monitors because they just use the electrical parameters. And also installation of how we install this technology to a process. So it's very important to monitor pressure in different processes. This is just an example of depth filtration, but monitoring control can measure capacity, prevent product loss, safety, and also allows you to acquire data. In a tangential flow, very similar, but also allows you to measure transmembrane pressure, which is a critical process parameter. On bioreactor pressure monitoring, monitoring the headspace can prevent a catastrophic loss of the batch and also confirm there's positive pressure. The main monitor we sell with our sensors is called the PressureMAT monitor, and as you see, it has inputs for sensors, and it has outputs that are available for interface to higher level systems or a PC. So customers can use this and integrate that, and it has all the outputs that are available. It also can be panel mounted. So something like this, you have to make sure is available to facilitate integration to a higher level system if that would be required. This touches on another aspect. Different sensors, by using different electronics, can perform in different ways. So we came out with this high-resolution pressure monitor that can only read to 7 psi, but it can read to 3 decimals. So with the same sensor, by electronic modification, you can do different things with a sensor. And there's other technologies that have similar examples of that. So you're always not limited by the sensor itself. The electronics also matter. This is an example of our conductivity sensor. So there's no calibration required because we predetermined the cell constant. So if that's a method that would be acceptable, we predetermine the K factor, and that's entered into the monitor by the user. So that's why a calibration is not required. And within the conductivity sensor is also a thermistor, which is very similar to an RTD, but with a more narrow range, but it's very low cost. that has the ability to very accurately measure temperature because of a defined resistance versus temperature. And that has a similar monitor. In terms of UV absorbance, that's a different type of measure. The actual sensors aren't touching the fluid. It's shining through the light path. And I think a lot of people are familiar with UV or turbidity. The important aspect of this is the path length. What's the path length that you're measuring? And it's very applicable to filtration and chromatography processes. But in this case, the sensor is basically just gives you a window to the fluid, and the monitor is really the key performing factor in your measurement. The only thing the single-use cell does is give the window and maintain a 1 centimeter path length, and the light source detector don't touch the fluid. So in this case, you can have a simple photometer that you need to qualify on its own. So one of the ways to qualify a photometer would be a comparative performance evaluation. And so this was early on with one of our customers. They compared the single-use UV to a more traditional instrument in several runs. They recorded the results and found it to be comparable. And so that's another thing that's important when looking at qualifying technology. Taking the sensors out of the loop for a second, a lot of metrology people have experienced a paradigm shift because they're used to very traditional instrumentation. So what's important is how do you qualify a monitor on its own, because a sensor has its own attributes which will be changed. So how do you qualify a monitor? Well, there's different tools that are available to check the different technologies without actually needing to use a sensor. So you're basically just verifying monitor performance. For pressure, you can apply a millivolt. Temperature, you can do a resistance simulation, same as conductivity. And absorbance, you can use absorbance standards to make sure the monitor is performing correctly. In terms of integration to higher level of control systems, I guess it's your left. The sensors and monitors really are on the far left. You have the single-use sensor that plugs into a monitor, it does the signal conditioning. And that's really no different than, say, like a scale. A scale has a load cell, and then typically it has a display where you can view the values, and then there could be standard communication options or more advanced communication options. So as far as communication, that's where there's very few standards. To a lot of our customers, surprisingly, the analog signals are still very common because they're well-defined, easy to use, and low cost. There's digital technology is definitely gaining more prominence, and we get asked for it, but a lot of customers are slowly moving in that direction. And once you get to digital communication, there's really no standard that everyone's settled on. So this just lists some of the communication options, and the 4-20 with HART gives you a little ability to probe an instrument for certain attributes like that may be important. Like in our next generation UV, we're looking at using HART to probe the light life left, so the number of hours the light was used and its intensity. So you can do that over analog. And we're looking at Modbus as more of a standard bus technology, but that's down the road. And then from the communication, you go to more of a higher level process control system, such as a PLC, SCADA, Delta V, or other. And then from there, you go to more of a data server to a plant historian. So that's kind of how the sensors and monitors integrate. That's only really the two far boxes on the left that participate in this. The rest are really the higher level systems. And this was the checklist we touched on at the beginning of the presentation. So these are very important to look at if you were thinking of implementing a single-use technology. And the last slide is really just some conclusions. So the first conclusion is that single-use sensors are very robust technology, and they can be considered for use in GMP processes, and you start with a user requirements checklist. Qualification data may be available, such as a validation guide from a supplier, which will help you with any potential validation qualification work that may need to be completed. And these sensors are already being used in a wide range of development and GMP production applications. And in most applications, there's no performance no sacrifice in performance versus traditional instrumentation, and possibly some improvements can be gained. And single-use sensors not only facilitate a local measurement, but they allow for real-time monitoring and trending for process performance. And the last slide showed us they can be read locally, but also integrated to higher-level systems, even all the way up to a plant data historian. That's the end of the presentation. Thank you. You have a question? That's a good question. We get asked for that all the time. The question was, why is the industry so slow in adopting wireless communication? And I would take even a step back from that. The industry is very conservative and is even slow to adopt single-use sensing technology, and I think that would be the next evolution. But there's definitely issues with a lot of these systems that are kept on continuously with relation to power. Even like a wireless RTD, if it has a battery in there, it may only last a limited amount of time. I'm not totally familiar with all the technology, but definitely the power requirements for some of these sensors would need to help dictate that. I mean, you could have a local transmitter with wireless technology. Some of our customers have done that. But in a lot of these plants, because of all the signals flying around, they're somewhat reluctant to use wireless technology. Thank you.